Yeah, I'd love to jump in. I think my biggest question is like the difference we see what Ohio State is doing now versus kind of the middle of the season and even in the Michigan game where the offense struggled. Like, what has been the big difference? We had those tight games. The Penn State game was pretty tight in the middle of the season. The Nebraska game was tighter than it probably should have been. They had that explosion versus Purdue and things start to step up. Like, what's been this next gear that they found in the playoffs that they're just blowing teams off the field?
Well, obviously the offensive line's gone through a lot of changes, and they lost Josh Simmons, the left tackle, in the Oregon game. Then Seth McLaughlin was lost for the season prior to the Indiana game. He suffered an Achilles injury, non-contact injury in practice, took a bad step or something on the field turf. And that's not the first time that's happened at Ohio State. It happened to one of the running backs, I want to say Master Teague, maybe 3 or 4 years ago as well. So this is something that has kind of plagued Ohio State a little bit. I don't know if it's a field turf issue or exactly what it is, but at any rate, they had to kind of regroup on the offensive line, and that led to some inconsistency at times. And they finally have settled on what seems to be the best offensive line group that they can put out there, and that is Donovan Jackson, who was the guard on the left side, playing left tackle, Austin Sierreveld and Luke Montgomery alternating at left guard. It's very unorthodox, but on the third or fourth series, they put Luke Montgomery in the game, number 51, and he replaces Sierreveld. Carson Hinsman started last season. He was on the bench for the first 9 games this season when Seth McLaughlin, who came in from Alabama, started at center. And Hinsman originally got in at guard, and then obviously when McLaughlin got hurt, they put him over to center. And then you got Tegra Shabola. He's just a big body guy at right guard. And right tackle is Josh Fryer, a guy who's really kind of a self-made guy. He worked really hard in the offseason to improve his agility and his strength and everything. And he's become a very good player for them over at right tackle. So, you look at it, it shouldn't be as good as it is, but the offensive line has come together. They've been together for about 3 games now. They pass protected outstanding. I want to say Michigan, Tennessee, and Texas, no sacks in those 3 games, or if there was 1 sack against Michigan, that was it. So, they have played outstanding in terms of pass protection. The run game has not been, maybe what you'd think it should be or would be. Had Simmons and McLaughlin been healthy, I think they'd continue to maul people. But having said that, Henderson and the other back, Quinshon Judkins, the transfer from Ole Miss, they are both in position to go over the 1,000-yard mark in this game. I think they're both about 60 or 70 yards short of 1,000, and that would be a great accomplishment to have 2 guys go over 1,000 in a season. So, it's kind of in a nutshell. They decided after Michigan, where they tried to put a square peg in a round hole, trying to run the ball against the defensive tackles from Michigan, that they were going to go up top and throw the ball as much as they could. And it's paid huge dividends because Tennessee and Oregon really were no match for them throwing the football. So Howard over 300 yards in both games, only just 1 interception. And that was a bad luck play against Tennessee. The ball went off Jeremiah Smith's hand when he was being interfered with in the end zone, and it went right to the Tennessee linebacker, and he made the interception. So, you think about it, everything's clicked pretty well for them. 42 points in the first game against Tennessee, 41 points against Oregon. And, they're hitting on all cylinders at the right time, even with kind of a patchwork offensive line.
It's amazing how that works out sometimes. I think my other first big question on the offense is you mentioned it, but I was driving and had to listen to that Michigan game. But just what was the thought behind it? I'm sure somebody has asked Chip Kelly what he saw in Michigan that he tried to kind of create that game plan. It just seemed like they went away from everything that worked. And is it just a case that Texas fans see with Sark all the time, where one of the best offensive minds in the country just kind of overthinks things. Like, what was the thought behind that? If we have any insight into it.
Before Steve goes, I think Steve scratching his head tells you all you need to know about what the answer should be there. I think that's everything.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows what Chip Kelly was thinking that day. It was a complex situation. The first quarter and a half, they were playing pretty good, but then Will Howard went on a scramble, and I think Michigan scrambled him a little bit. He went to the tent, and there were a couple TV timeouts in there while this all happened, and he ended up only missing one play. And he got back on the field, and he said he was fine. The medical personnel said he was fine, was not concussed, but he was obviously not the same quarterback, because after the injury or after the hit, he was only 13 of 25 after that. He's been a 70% passer, most of the time. So they couldn't do things in the passing game like they had hoped. And Michigan took away the run game. So they were going 3 and out and not generating any offense. Jack Sawyer, he had an interception in that game to stop a touchdown. Caleb Downs had an interception in that game to give him possession at like the 15-yard line, and they ended up missing a field goal and didn't even score as a result of it. They missed 2 short field goals, and Howard threw 2 interceptions, very uncharacteristic, and they weren't able to take advantage of the passing game. Had no running game to speak of in that game. So, yeah, it was a perfect storm of they just ran into the wrong team at the wrong time, and the quarterback, to my way of thinking, he wasn't right. And instead of subbing Devin Brown or somebody else in there to finish the game, they had Howard try and gut it out, and it didn't work, unfortunately, for Ohio State that day. But the 2 games since then, everything's kind of clicked together. So
it just seems like such a weird fly in the ointment situation of what's been a really solid offensive year. So I had to ask the question when I had the opportunity.
Gerald, you mentioned the game that Will Howard had against Texas last year. I remember that one. And if I'm not mistaken, Texas was up by like 17 points in that game. And Kansas State came back to tie it and lost in overtime. Will Howard, you mentioned, over 300 yards passing. But this Texas secondary, if I'm not mistaken, considerably better than that one.
Yeah, they had some addition by subtraction, which sounds like a terrible thing to say, but they had some folks transfer out that maybe weren't up to the task. They had some guys transfer in to replace them. Andrew Makuba is the guy from Clemson that I really point to as like the big difference maker on the back end for Texas. This is a market improvement from last year's secondary. That was still pretty solid. But yeah, Will Howard had his way with the secondary last year. And so the secondary is better. Jahdae Barron's been better. Manny Muhammad, like I said earlier in the live stream, is the one to really watch. He's had some really good weeks where it's like Muhammad Island over there on the left side of the field, but Clemson saw something against him that they really liked and picked him apart a bit. He's had some weird decisions he's made in pass coverage. The Cam Scatabo passing touchdown, he took a bad line on the receiver. He could have been in spot to knock it down, but just didn't do it, and then kind of gave up on the play afterwards, which is really weird. So it's been an interesting journey to watch, we'll say.